Imagine this. A powerful fallen angel, full of pride and darkness, is sent on a mission to destroy you. He thinks it will be easy. After all, he has deceived and broken countless souls before. But this time, something is different. The moment he faces you, his confidence shakes. His mind, once filled with wicked schemes, begins to question, why can't he break you? Why do his usual tricks fail? The more he tries to destroy you, the deeper he falls into his own trap. Instead of controlling you, he becomes obsessed with you. This is not just a battle of light and darkness. This is a battle of power, pride, and truth. The narcissistic fallen angel thought he was untouchable, but now he's the one losing control. His arrogance turns into confusion. His hatred turns into fear. And the worst part? He can't escape you. Why does this happen? Why do dark forces get drawn to the chosen ones? And most importantly, what does this mean for you? Stay with me till the end as we uncover this mind-blowing mystery. And if you're ready to step into your power, show some love, join the community, and let's expose the truth together. Let me know if you'd like any tweaks or a different tone. In the depths of the unseen world where shadows whisper and secrets hide, a powerful fallen angel receives his next mission. He is feared, ruthless, and full of pride. He believes he is unstoppable. His master gives him a chilling order: eliminate the chosen one. To him, this is just another task. He has done this before. He has broken minds, stolen souls, and crushed the weak. He enjoys it. He feeds on fear. He sees himself as a master of deception, a ruler of darkness. No one has ever escaped him. But this time, something is different. The chosen one is not like the others. There is something unshakable, something untouchable. The fallen angel watches, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. He tries to plant doubt, whisper lies, create confusion, but nothing works. His power, his tricks, his darkness, none of it is enough. A deep frustration grows within him. How is this possible? How can one soul resist him? He was supposed to be in control. He was supposed to be the hunter, not the hunted. And then it happens. Something he never expected. The darkness that once gave him power begins to turn against him. His own arrogance becomes his weakness. The very trap he set for the chosen one starts to close in on him. The fear he once inflicted on others now grips his own heart. For the first time, he realizes he is not as powerful as he thought. This was never just a mission. This was a test he is now failing. The air grows heavy as the fallen angel descends, his presence like a storm rolling in. He moves with absolute confidence, believing this will be just another victory, just another soul crushed under his power. He has been here before, many times. He knows how this ends. His targets always fall, always submit, always crumble in fear. He expects nothing different this time. But then, he sees you. For a moment, he hesitates. It's small, almost unnoticeable, but it's there. Something about you is not right, or rather, not normal. He was prepared for fear, for weakness, for easy control. But instead he finds something unexpected. You are not afraid. His eyes narrow. He tries to shake off the feeling, to regain his dominance. He speaks words meant to shatter your mind, but they don't land the way they should. The power he once wielded so easily feels distant. He tells himself it's nothing, just a delay, just a minor flaw in his plan. But deep inside he knows the truth. Something is shifting. His confidence wavers. His mission, once so clear, starts to unravel. And for the first time, he is the one who feels uncertain. The fallen angel watches you with cold, piercing eyes. He has broken countless souls before, made the strong weak, the fearless afraid. Manipulation is his greatest weapon. He whispers lies, plants doubt, and wraps his victims in a web of confusion until they no longer know who they are. And now he turns his focus on you. He moves closer, his presence like a suffocating shadow, twisting the air around him. He speaks words meant to shake you, words designed to make you question yourself, to pull you into fear. His voice is smooth, laced with poison. He knows exactly what to say, how to say it. But something is wrong. You don't flinch. Your presence is different. The usual fear, the weakness, the surrender, it doesn't come. Instead, you stand firm, unshaken. There is something inside you that he cannot touch. He tries again. A stronger attack, more deception, more mind games. He reaches into the deepest parts of your soul, searching for cracks. There must be something he can use, some hidden fear, some buried pain. But the more he tries to break you, the more he starts to feel something he never expected, exposed. Your presence is not just resisting him, it is revealing him. For the first time, he feels something he has never felt before. His own darkness is being exposed. The light within you is not just pushing him back, it is illuminating everything he wanted to keep hidden. His arrogance begins to crack. The confidence he wore like armor now feels heavy, suffocating. He has spent his existence believing he was in control, that no force was greater than him. But here, standing before you, he realizes he was wrong. Something shifts. The hunter becomes the hunted. His own lies, his own deception, the very tools he used to break others are now turning against him. The trap he set for you is now wrapping around him. And deep inside, he knows he has already lost. The fallen angel moves with the certainty of a predator. He believes this will be easy. After all, he has shattered minds, stolen souls, and manipulated even the strongest. He has always been in control. But what he does not see, what his arrogance refuses to let him see, is that he is already walking into his own trap. He was so sure of himself, so sure of his power. He thought he could twist reality, bend your will, and make you fall like all the others. But this time, something is different. The usual tricks don't work, the deception doesn't land, and the more he tries, the more desperate he becomes. His frustration grows. His mind, once sharp and calculated, begins to falter. He pushes harder, trying to force his will upon you, but the harder he pushes, the weaker he becomes. This was never supposed to happen. He was supposed to be in control. He was supposed to be untouchable, invincible, but now he feels something creeping in. Something unfamiliar, something dangerous, doubt. For the first time he questions himself. His arrogance, once his greatest strength, is now his greatest weakness. His pride, once a weapon, is now his cage. The very trap he set for you, he is now caught in it. The more he tries to break you, the deeper he falls. The more he fights, the more he loses control. He cannot understand why, but deep inside, he knows the truth. This is not your downfall, this is his. The fallen angel watches you closely, his sharp gaze, studying every movement, every breath. He has done this 1,000 times before. He knows how to break a mind, how to twist thoughts, until his victims no longer know what is real. And so he begins. His words are precise, dripping with poison. He plants seeds of doubt, weaving illusions meant to shake you. He whispers that you are weak, that you are alone, that no one will save you. He reminds you of every failure, every fear, every hidden insecurity. This is his game. A battle not of fists but of minds, but something is different. You don't react the way he expects. Most would have already crumbled. Most would have let the doubt take root, let fear creep in, but instead of falling, you rise. His words should have broken you, but instead they fuel you. The lies he spins shatter against the truth, burning within you. The more he pushes, the stronger you become. And that's when it happens. For the first time, he feels powerless. The game he has always controlled is slipping through his fingers. His tricks no longer work. His power, built on fear, deception, and control, is failing him. And now he is the one who feels small. A battle he thought would be effortless has become his greatest struggle. The unshakable light within you is not just resisting him, it is undoing him. And deep inside he realizes, he was never the one in control. The fallen angel was sent to destroy you. That was his only mission. Quick, clean, absolute. But now he hesitates. You should have been like the others, weak, afraid, easily manipulated. He was supposed to break you, consume you, erase you. But instead you remain standing, unshaken, unmoved. At first, he tells himself it's a mistake, a temporary miscalculation, but deep inside something is wrong. He can't stop watching you. Instead of moving on, he lingers, studying your every move, searching for an answer. Why didn't his tricks work? Why didn't his power break you? He replays every moment, every word, every attempt to control you, but nothing adds up. The more he tries to understand, the deeper he sinks into obsession. He watches from the shadows, unseen, but molds others to his will and leaves them shattered, their identities erased. But now, something is wrong. His usual games don't work on you. His words don't shake you. His presence doesn't weaken you. No matter how many illusions he weaves, how many doubts he tries to plant, you remain standing, unmoved, untouched. And it terrifies him. A narcissist without control is nothing. Without control, he is powerless. And for the first time, he feels it creeping in. Fear. He tells himself it's impossible. He is the predator, not the prey. But the truth is undeniable. The more he tries to dominate you, the more he loses himself. His mind, once sharp and calculated, begins to fracture. Doubt infects him like a poison. If he cannot control you, then what is he? If his power fails against you, then what does that make him? His own mind becomes his prison. He obsesses, he spirals, he questions everything he once knew. And worst of all, you don't even fear him. That is his true nightmare. Not just losing control, but realizing he never had it over you in the first place. He stands before you, his presence dark and overwhelming. His voice drips with threats, his eyes burn with rage. He wants you to believe he's in control, that he is untouchable, that he is still the predator. But beneath the anger, beneath the arrogance, something festers. Fear. He won't show it, he can't. A being like him doesn't feel fear. He dominates, he destroys, he bends the world to his will. But deep inside, behind the mask of power, he knows the truth. He doesn't fear what you do, he fears what you are. You are different. He has encountered thousands before you, and none have ever stood against him like this. None have resisted his power, his manipulation, his control. But you are untouchable. His tricks slide off you like smoke. His darkness cannot consume your light. And that terrifies him, because if you cannot be broken, if you cannot be controlled, then what does that mean for him? His entire existence has been built on power, on bending others to his will. But now, standing before you, he feels something he never has before. Powerless. He tries to bury it beneath rage, beneath cruelty. He lashes out, pushing harder, desperate to prove to himself that he still holds control. But every time he fails, the fear grows. He doesn't just fear losing. He fears what your presence reveals about him. Because if you stand unshaken, then maybe, just maybe, he was never as powerful as he thought. His world was built on dominance, power, control, manipulation. These were his weapons. He knew the rules of the game because he was the one who made them. For centuries, he twisted minds, broke spirits, and fed off the fear of those who dared stand before him. But then you happened. At first, he saw you as just another target, another weak soul to crush beneath his will. He approached with his usual confidence, sure of the outcome before the battle had even begun. But something was different. You did not flinch, you did not crumble, you did not obey. He tried everything: deception, intimidation, even offering false kindness, laced with hidden traps. But no matter what he did, you remained untouchable. His illusions slid off you like water. His power had no hold. And then, for the first time in his existence, a terrible thought crept into his mind. What if he wasn't as powerful as he thought? The idea was absurd, impossible. He was the predator, the ruler of minds, the master of deception. But with every failed attempt to break you, that tiny crack in his confidence grew. He told himself you were lucky, that he was distracted, that soon he would regain control. But deep inside, another truth was beginning to form, one he couldn't ignore. It wasn't just that you were strong, it was that he had never been as powerful as he believed. His entire existence had been shaped by the illusion that he was untouchable. He thrived on bending others to his will, feeding on their fear. But you were showing him a reality he was never meant to see. What if all the power he held was never real? What if those he controlled had simply allowed themselves to be controlled? What if his strength had always depended on others believing in it? The more he watched you, the more that illusion shattered. You saw through him, not just his tricks, but his very nature. You saw the cracks in his armor, the weakness in his foundation, and once seen, they could not be unseen. Panic crept into his mind, though he hid it behind anger. He needed to stop this. If you did not fear him, if you did not bow, then others could do the same. If one could resist, then many could. His world, his power, his very identity, all of it was built on a lie. And now, standing before you, he could feel it crumbling. For the first time, he wasn't the one controlling the game. For the first time, he was the one trapped. He never hesitated. Not once in his existence had he questioned his purpose. He
was the predator, the enforcer, the nightmare lurking in the shadows. He had broken kings, crushed prophets, and manipulated the strongest of minds into submission. Doubt was for the weak, but then, for the first time, he hesitated. It was barely noticeable at first. A flicker in his expression, a fraction of a second where his movements slowed, but it was there. A crack in the foundation of his absolute certainty. Something inside him wavered, and that changed everything. He had been sent to destroy you. It should have been simple. It had always been simple. But standing before you, something felt wrong. His instincts screamed at him to finish it, to end this before the hesitation spread like a disease through his mind. But he couldn't. Not because he wasn't strong enough. Not because he lacked the power. But because something about you unsettled him. He saw it in your eyes. That unshakable presence, that quiet defiance. You weren't afraid. Not of him, not of his power, not of the fate that should have awaited you. And for the first time, he questioned something he had never questioned before. Why? Why weren't you afraid? Why didn't you crumble like the others? Why did his power have no hold on you? And then came the worst realization of all. The power wasn't slipping from you. It was slipping from him. He had always been in control, always the one dictating the game. But now, that control was unraveling before his eyes. The more he tried to assert his dominance, the weaker he felt. The more he pushed against you, the more his own mind pushed back against him. Something had changed. No, he had changed, and that terrified him. Because now he wasn't just fighting you. He was fighting himself. He was created for power, for destruction. He never questioned, never hesitated. His will was absolute. But now, standing before you, something is wrong. He wants to destroy you. He should have done it already. Every part of him screams to finish the mission. erase you, end this, regain control. And yet, he lingers. At first, he tells himself it's strategy. He's waiting for the right moment, studying you, looking for a weakness. But deep down, he knows the truth. He's the one who is weakening. Why can't he do it? It doesn't make sense. He has taken down the strongest, crushed the purest, and turned even the most unshakable into dust. But you defy every rule of his existence. He tries to convince himself that this is temporary, just an obstacle to overcome. But the more he fights you, the more he feels something he cannot afford to feel. Doubt. It seeps into his mind like a slow poison. What if he's wrong? What if everything he believed, everything he fought for, was built on deception? What if he's not as powerful as he once thought? Every attack he throws at you bounces back, not because of strength, but because of something greater, something he doesn't understand. And worse, something he craves. He wants to walk away. End this battle before it destroys him. But something about you keeps pulling him back. It's not defiance. It's not resistance. It's your light. It doesn't just block him. It reaches into him, stirring something ancient, something buried, something he has spent an eternity running from. He thought he was unbreakable, but now he is fighting a war not with you, but with himself. He was once a force to be feared, a warrior of darkness, a commander of chaos. His power was unquestioned, his authority absolute. His masters praised him, his kind followed him, and the weak trembled in his presence. But now, everything has changed. He hesitated. That moment of weakness, his failure to destroy you, did not go unnoticed. The same forces that once empowered him now watch him with suspicion. The whispers start, quiet at first, but growing louder with each passing moment. He is not what he once was. His masters, the ones who gave him his orders, now look at him with cold, unforgiving eyes. You failed, they say. He tries to deny it, tries to justify, to explain. But deep inside, he knows the truth. He didn't just fail them, he failed himself. Because it wasn't just you who was different. He was different. Something in him changed the moment he saw you, the moment he realized he couldn't break you. And now, his own kind can sense it. The power he once held over others is slipping, and the ones he called allies do not tolerate weakness. The betrayal comes swiftly. First, they strip him of their favor. His strength starts to wane. The shadows he once controlled begin to recoil from him. His own forces, creatures he commanded without question, turn their backs. Then, the punishment. The fallen angel, once untouchable, is now the hunted. The same beings who once followed his every command now seek to erase him. And in that moment, he realizes the harshest truth of all. He was never truly powerful. His strength came from their approval, their commands, their darkness feeding his own. But now he stands alone.
The fallen angel, once untouchable, is now the hunted. The same beings who once followed his every command now seek to erase him. And in that moment he realizes the harshest truth of all. He was never truly powerful. His strength came from their approval, their commands, their darkness feeding his own. But now he stands alone. The narcissist who once believed he was above all is now abandoned. The predator has become the prey, and the only one left standing is you. For the first time in his existence, he feels small. The power that once surged through his veins is gone. The darkness that shielded him, the arrogance that defined him, all of it has crumbled. He stands before you, no longer a hunter, no longer a warrior of destruction, but something far more fragile, a lost soul. He looks at you, searching for the fear he was once so sure of. But it isn't there. It was never there. You were never afraid of him. Not when he descended upon you with his mission of destruction. Not when he tried to manipulate you. break you, twist your mind into submission, not even when he turned his own rage against you, hoping to crush what he couldn't control. And now, as he stands before you, stripped of everything that once made him feel invincible, he finally understands why. It wasn't that you didn't recognize his power, it wasn't that you underestimated his strength, it was that you saw through him, through the illusions, through the fear tactics, through the mask of superiority he wore so well. You saw him for what he truly was. And now so does he. The awakening isn't gentle. It's not a revelation filled with peace and understanding. No, it is raw, brutal, and undeniable, because for the first time he is forced to face himself, without the lies, without the power, without the identity he clung to for so long, just a fallen angel standing in the presence of something he cannot corrupt, cannot twist, cannot break. And perhaps the most terrifying part of all, he no longer wants to. He was sent to destroy you. A being of darkness, forged in deception, wielding the power of fear and manipulation. He had done this countless times before, tearing down souls, corrupting the innocent, feeding on weakness. But you were different. You didn't tremble when he arrived. You didn't bow to his threats, you didn't fall for his tricks, and that was the beginning of his downfall. He tried every tactic he knew. Mind games, illusions, whispers of doubt meant to unravel your sense of self. He had shattered the will of kings, made warriors question their purpose, driven even the strongest to their knees. But you stood firm. You didn't need a sword, you didn't need an army, you didn't need to destroy him, because your power was never about force. It was something far greater. It was truth. The truth of who you were, the light you carried, the unshakable core of your being. It was a power he had never encountered before, not because it was hidden, but because it could not be touched by him. The more he fought you, the more his own illusions crumbled. At first, he told himself you were just another obstacle. Then, he convinced himself he only needed a different strategy. Then he thought maybe he could bend you to his will if he tried harder. But then he started to question. Why couldn't he break you? Why did your presence feel so different? Why did his own power waver every time he came near you? And the most dangerous thought of all, the one he tried to push away but couldn't escape. What if he was wrong? What if everything he had believed, everything he had built himself upon, was a lie? He had always seen himself as the predator, the superior force. But as he watched you stand unwavering, refusing to cower, refusing to be controlled, he realized something he never thought possible. He was the weak one. Not because he lacked strength, not because he lacked power, but because his entire existence relied on deception. And you? You saw through it all. For the first time he was exposed, not just to you, but to himself. And the weight of that truth was more devastating than any weapon could ever be. Because you didn't just survive him, you changed him. Not with words, not with battle, not with hatred, but simply by being who you were always meant to be. And that was a power he could never defeat. He stands at the edge of everything he has ever known, staring into the abyss of his own shattered identity. The mission that once defined him, so simple, so absolute, has unraveled into something he can no longer comprehend. He was sent to destroy you, to break you, to erase your existence from the fabric of destiny, but instead, he is the one who has been undone. Every trick, every deception, every manipulation that had worked so flawlessly on others fell apart the moment they met the unshakable force of your truth. And now, as he looks at you, he realizes something terrifying. He has a choice. The darkness that once empowered him now feels suffocating, no longer a source of strength, but a prison he never noticed until now. The whispers of his masters grow fainter, their once unquestionable commands now dripping with the weight of a lie too great to ignore. He could return to them, cling to the only reality he has ever known, bury the unsettling emotions clawing at his soul, and convince himself that none of this ever happened. But deep down, he knows the truth. He will never be the same. The certainty that once fueled his existence has been replaced with something far more dangerous, doubt. And that doubt is spreading, unraveling the very foundation of the darkness he served so faithfully. Yet redemption is not so simple. To turn away from his past means to face the consequences of his actions, to confront the wreckage he has left behind, to acknowledge the suffering he has caused. Can he bear it? Can he survive the weight of his own guilt? Or will he fall back into the shadows, not out of loyalty, but out of fear of what lies beyond them? The choice is his alone, but one thing is undeniable. His encounter with you has changed him forever, and no matter what path he chooses, he will never forget the one soul who refused to be broken. He stands at the edge of everything he has ever known, staring into the abyss of his own shattered identity. The mission that once defined him, so simple, so absolute, has unraveled into something he can no longer comprehend. He was sent to destroy you, to break you, to erase your existence from the fabric of destiny, but instead, he is the one who has been undone. Every trick, every deception, every manipulation that had worked so flawlessly on others fell apart the moment they met the unshakable force of your truth. And now, as he looks at you, he realizes something terrifying. He has a choice. The darkness that once empowered him now feels suffocating, no longer a source of strength, but a prison he never noticed until now. The whispers of his masters grow fainter, their once unquestionable commands now dripping with the weight of a lie too great to ignore. He could return to them, cling to the only reality he has ever known, bury the unsettling emotions clawing at his soul, and convince himself that none of this ever happened. But deep down, he knows the truth. He will never be the same. The certainty that once fueled his existence has been replaced with something far more dangerous, doubt. And that doubt is spreading, unraveling the very foundation of the darkness he served so faithfully. Yet redemption is not so simple. To turn away from his past means to face the consequences of his actions, to confront the wreckage he has left behind, to acknowledge the suffering he has caused. Can he bear it? Can he survive the weight of his own guilt? Or will he fall back into the shadows, not out of loyalty, but out of fear of what lies beyond them? He thought he was beyond fear, beyond weakness, beyond questioning. But you changed everything. There is something about you that he cannot define, something that disrupts the very core of his being. It is not power, not magic, not force. It is something far deeper, something he cannot fight against. He has seen warriors fall before him, entire realms crumble beneath his will, but he has never seen a soul like yours, one that does not bend, does not cower, does not succumb. In your presence, his illusions were shattered, his lies exposed, his purpose questioned. And the worst part? You did nothing except be. You did not try to change him, did not try to fight him, did not try to convince him of anything. You simply stood, unbroken, unwavering, and in doing so you made him see himself for what he truly was. For the first time, he is unsure. The darkness he once wore like a second skin now feels foreign, unnatural, constricting. But it is all he has ever known. To step away from it, to seek something else, something unknown, terrifies him more than any battle, more than any punishment his masters could inflict. Because the moment he chooses to walk away, he will have to face everything he has done. And that may be the one thing he cannot survive. But if he stays, if he buries this moment, this realization, if he forces himself back into the darkness, will he ever truly escape what he now knows? He can no longer unsee the truth. He can no longer pretend that his masters speak only wisdom, that their orders are beyond question. He can no longer deny that for the first time in his existence he felt something real, something beyond control, beyond power. He is trapped between two fates, both equally terrifying. If he turns back, he will never be the same again, forever haunted by the truth you exposed. If he steps forward, he walks into the unknown, stripped of the identity that once gave him purpose. The war within him is reaching its climax, and the final decision is his alone. And you simply watch, knowing that no matter what he chooses, he will never forget the one soul who refused to be broken. He was meant to be your ending, a force of destruction, a shadow sent to erase you without question, without hesitation. His masters had carved this mission into his very being. There was no room for doubt, no space for failure, and yet here he stands, caught in the one thing he never expected, a beginning, not yours, but his. Everything he was, his pride, his power, his certainty, has been torn apart, not by battle, not by resistance, but by something far worse, by the truth. A truth he was never meant to see, never meant to understand. And now it refuses to leave him. It burns behind his eyes, echoes in his mind, gnaws at the very foundation of the darkness he once served without question. You were supposed to be nothing more than an obstacle, another victim, a task to complete and forget. But instead, you have become the one thing he cannot escape. Not because of force, not because of tricks or power, but because you exist outside of everything he thought was real. Your presence alone has shattered the lie he built his existence upon. For the first time, he is lost. The weight of his past, the chains of his purpose, the voices that once commanded him without resistance, they no longer hold him the way they did before. He was once a being of absolute certainty, of unshakable devotion to the darkness that shaped him. But now he hesitates, he questions, he feels, and that is the most terrifying thing of all, because now he knows his story did not begin when he was created, nor when he was given his mission. It begins here, in the moment where he was supposed to end yours. It begins with the one soul he could not break. It begins with the truth he was never meant to see, and there is no turning back. He came to end your story, but now you're the reason his own story has just begun. From the moment he descended, the fallen angel carried only one purpose: to erase you. He had done this countless times before, eliminating those who stood in the way of his masters, reducing powerful souls to nothing more than distant memories. He never questioned, he never failed, until now. Standing before you, he expected fear, he expected submission, he expected to see yet another fragile human crumble beneath the weight of his presence. Instead, what he found was something far more dangerous. You did not fear him. At first, he dismissed it as arrogance, a temporary defiance. He believed that, like all others before you, you would eventually break. He tried intimidation, manipulation, whispers of doubt meant to unravel the strongest of minds, but nothing worked. No matter what he did, you remained unshaken. And that's when the first crack appeared. For the first time, doubt crept into him, a whisper in his mind that should not have been there. He ignored it, fought against it, convinced himself that this was nothing more than an anomaly. But as the battle of wills continued, the whisper grew louder. Something was wrong. You were not just another assignment. You were not like the others he had destroyed. There was something different about you, something even he could not name, and it terrified him. He tried to justify it, to tell himself that this was merely an unexpected challenge, but deep down he knew the truth. It wasn't you who was crumbling, it was him. His masters had prepared him for every scenario, every enemy, every force that could stand in his way, but they never prepared him for this. They never told him what to do if he could not complete his mission. They never warned him that the real danger was not in failing to kill you, but in what would happen if he couldn't bring himself to do it. And now, that danger had become his reality. For the first time in his existence, he was powerless, not because he lacked strength, but because his strength meant nothing against you. The very core of his being, the foundation of everything he had ever known, was breaking beneath the weight of this undeniable truth. He was sent to end your story. But instead, his own story had just begun. He had spent an eternity believing he was untouchable, unshakable, immune to the things that plagued weaker beings. Yet here he stood, shaken to his very soul. The darkness he once embraced no longer felt the same. The power he once wielded no longer felt unbreakable, and the control he once had over himself, it was slipping. The masters who had commanded him would never forgive this. They would never accept that their weapon had begun to rust, that their most trusted warrior had hesitated. He was no longer their perfect creation. He was no longer the predator in this game. He was something else now, something lost. He tried to hold on to his anger. He tried to remind himself of his mission, but the truth was relentless. It clawed at him, burned through his thoughts, refused to be buried. And for
the first time, he asked himself a question he had never dared to ask before. What if everything I believed was a lie? The answer terrified him, because if this mission was built on lies, then so was his purpose. And if his purpose was a lie, then who was he? He had come to erase you. Yet now, he stood before you, his existence unraveling with every second that passed. You had not fought him with weapons. You had not begged for mercy or cowered in fear. You had simply been. And that alone had been enough to bring him to his knees. This was not just failure, this was the end of everything he thought he was. But it was also something else, something even more terrifying. It was a beginning, not yours, his. The story he had been forced to follow, the path carved out for him before he even had a choice. None of it mattered anymore. His destiny was no longer in the hands of his masters. It was no longer written in stone. For the first time, the fallen angel stood at a crossroads he never believed possible. One road led back to his masters, to their wrath, to the punishment that awaited him for his weakness. The other was unknown. A path he had never walked before. A path he had never even dared to consider. His story should have ended today. Instead, it had just begun. And whether he embraced it or fought against it, one thing was certain. He would never be the same again. The battle between light and darkness was never just about power. It was about truth. The fallen angel, once blinded by arrogance and superiority, was sent to end the chosen one, but instead, he was the one undone. Every step he took to destroy, manipulate and break them only led him deeper into his own unraveling. He had thrived on control, feeding off the weaknesses of others, shaping destinies to his will. But the chosen one was different. They did not fear him, did not fall for his illusions, and did not waver in the face of his rage. Their existence alone shattered everything he believed in. At first, he saw their light as an obstacle, a force that needed to be extinguished. But the more he fought against it, the more he began to see what lay beneath his own mask. His confidence wavered. His mission turned to obsession. He wanted to understand, to break them, to prove that their strength was an illusion. But with every encounter, it was his own reality that cracked. The things he once believed were absolute, power, dominance, superiority, became meaningless. He realized the chosen one never needed to fight him. They only had to exist. Their presence alone was a weapon against the darkness, exposing every lie he had built his world upon. And then came the ultimate betrayal. Not from the chosen one, but from his own kind. They sensed his hesitation, his weakness. He had once been their perfect warrior, a relentless force of destruction, but now they saw the cracks forming in him, the seed of doubt growing. The very forces that had created him turned against him, leaving him abandoned, powerless, stripped of the identity he had once worn like armor. He was no longer the hunter, but the hunted, chased by his own failures, haunted by a truth he could no longer escape. Standing before the chosen one in his final moments of realization, he was no longer the terrifying, all-powerful being he once was. His wings were tattered, his voice carried no weight, and his fear, once something he inflicted upon others, was now his own burden to bear. He had spent an eternity shaping the fates of others, yet now, for the first time, his own fate was uncertain. Would he continue down the path of darkness, clinging to the shattered pieces of his former self? Or would he surrender to the truth and seek redemption? One thing was certain: his encounter with the Chosen One had changed him forever. His purpose had been rewritten, not by force, but by revelation. He had set out to end their story, but instead they had become the beginning of his. The Chosen One never had to fight him. They only had to show him what he had spent lifetimes avoiding: the inevitable truth that darkness, no matter how strong, will always crumble in the presence of unshakable light. For the first time, he questioned everything. Was his power truly his own, or had he been a puppet all along? Was his purpose destruction, or had he been deceived into thinking it was? He had always thought strength was about domination, yet here stood someone who possessed a strength that could not be taken, only understood. In the end, the fallen angel was left with a choice. Why would he cling to his old identity, the shattered illusion of power? Or would he surrender to the truth that real strength comes not from control, but from self-awareness, purpose, and light? One thing was certain: his encounter with the Chosen One had changed him forever. And now his story was only just beginning.